started. I'm going to run through my presentation, and my goal is to present and then have you guys ask questions at the end. Otherwise, if we do questions along the way, it's going to interrupt my whole pitch. And I just want to pitch it, if that makes sense. So I'm going to pitch my buyer's guide. I'm then going to pitch the IABS and then the buyer rep. And I'm going to just act like I'm presenting to somebody in this office. Nobody's here. But that's the plan. And then, oh, sorry guys, let me turn that off. And then, so you online, write down all your questions, and then we'll come and do a Q&A at the end, okay? Let's go ahead and get started. I think most of you that wanted to join us are in. This is my buyer's guide that I have recently manipulated. We have a Realty One buyer's guide on Canva that it's a Canva link. So this is my version of that. I have tweaked and added pages to it. I will share a copy of this one out there, but you guys are going to want to make your own version. You're going to want to edit it, make it personalized to you, add your own testimonials on it, maybe some of your stats. People are keep jumping in. I shouldn't have started. Yes. Hold on. Make sure nobody else is on my phone trying to get in. Okay. All right. Sorry about the Zoom link issue, guys. When we changed the dates, it changed the Zoom link and I didn't realize that, so I didn't update the calendar. Then when I did finally update the calendar, I only updated it on one of the Zooms and I had 2 Zoom links posted. So that was fun. All right. Cheryl's getting in now. I'm going to go ahead and start. And then whoever else gets in, they get in late. It is what it is. Okay. So as I said a minute ago, I'm going to present the buyer's guide. I'm going to present the IABS and then the buyer's rep to my imaginary buyer here in the office. We're going to say it's Amber in the office, even though there's nobody here. And let me get through it all. And when I ask questions to my imaginary buyer, I'm going to assume they're answering me and we're all going to pretend they're answering me. I should have made someone sit here with me, but I didn't think about that until the end. So it's okay. So we're going to pretend they answer. Most of my questions are all going to be yes questions. I'm going to ask yeses, or I'm going to ask questions where I want a yes answer, because in the end, I want them to say yes. So that's a sales technique. I'm going to present it all. Let me get it all out there. And then you guys ask questions at the end. So as we go through it, write down your questions and then we'll go through all your questions at the end. That's the goal. And maybe, hopefully this won't take a whole hour and a half. We'll see how we do. But this is my buyer's guide. I've taken the Realty One buyer's guide. There's 2 versions of the Realty One buyer's guide. There's one on Canva and one in Word. The Word is very basic. The Canva one, this is kind of the Canva version. I've just changed it with like my listing and photos and my testimonials, and I've added a couple pages recently to it. So we can share this version out there, but you guys are going to want to change it up and edit to your own needs. And then there's other things that I still want to add to this, but it's just going to be a work in progress for a while. So let's get started. Okay. So the first thing in the buyer consultation I'm going to do is ask my buyer. I'm going to go over what we've discussed. So Amber, when you and I talked on the phone, you mentioned you want to be in your next house by June. Your deadline's June 1st. Is that right? Yes. Okay, great. And you're looking at a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1-story, about $400,000 you think is your budget in the Buda Kyle area. Is that still correct? Yep. Okay, great. Is there anything else you think that's changed since we talked last that I should know about at this point? Nope. Okay, great. So the goal of today is just to dive into the process of buying a home. I want to make sure you get a basic understanding of the steps involved, why it's important to hire a realtor, why we want to talk to a lender, and answer the general math questions when it comes to buying a home. What kind of money is needed? Who's paying for what? That sort of thing. And then in the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can be represented in a home buying purchase by an agent like myself, and in the hopes that we want to work together in the end. And if we do decide to work together, then we're going to go ahead and sign some paperwork that just solidifies that agreement. How does that sound? Does that sound okay? Yes? Wonderful. Okay, so let's get going. So this is my buyer's guide, and I'm going to let you take this home. There's a lot of pages in here I'm not going to go over. Like, I'm not going to spend time reading about myself to you. You can read about that tonight when you're bored and you need help going to sleep, but that's just a little bit of information about my background, so you get to know me a little bit better. But this next page here, the steps in buying a home, that's where I want to really start our conversation today. So you'll see here it says in step 1, securing financing, and step 2 is hiring the realtor. I know from our conversation on the phone, you hadn't picked a lender yet, which is totally fine. You know, today, hopefully, again, we're going to agree to work together and you're going to technically hire me as your realtor, hopefully. But don't feel obligated to. If we get to the end of this and you don't feel comfortable moving forward, no problem at all. Don't worry about that. But the other step to this is securing financing. So we do pretty quickly want to go ahead and talk to a lender to get a good idea of what your home purchase price maximum is going to be. I know you've mentioned 400,000 to me is where you think you're comfortable based on a payment you were looking at, which is great. But I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page, including a lender who's going to have you apply on their website. So at the back of this book, the last page, I've got a few lenders that you can talk to, but you can talk to, you know, any lender of your choice. Do you have a preferred lender at this point? No? Okay, great. So I'd recommend talking to, you know, my lenders, or if you've talked to friends who have lenders that want to refer you, you know, maybe talk to a couple. For our immediate needs, we only need one lender's conversation to give us what's called a pre-qualification. They're going to let us know what's the maximum purchase price you're approved for, which is not necessarily where we want to focus our buying efforts. We want to make sure the most important piece is based on your financial situation. What monthly payment does that equal as far as your comfort level? And then what payment does that mean as far as a purchase price? So it's 2 steps. Like, a lender may approve you for 500,000, but that doesn't mean we're comfortable at a payment at 500,000. So we want to know, what is our max purchase price at a comfort monthly payment? Does that make sense? Yes, great. Okay. So the other reason we want to know that purchase price maximum, not only for our search and the ability to look at homes available, but we also need that pre-approval letter or pre-qualification letter so that when it's time to write an offer, we have that letter to accompany the offer. A seller is not going to entertain any offers without that letter in hand. So I don't like to start showing homes without having that letter, because if all of a sudden I run out and show you a home and you fall in love with it, and let's say it just came on the market yesterday and it's priced really, really well. So not only do you fall in love with it, but 4 other buyers fall in love with it. Now we're trying to write an offer, but we can't move quickly and write that offer quickly and get it in before those other offers, because now we're waiting on the lender piece. We don't want to ever be waiting on that lender piece. I also don't want to show you homes that are outside of our budget, because, you know, let's say you are approved for up to 5 and I show you a 5, and then you fall in love with the 5 home, but then you look at that payment finally once you talk to the lender and you realize that payment's too high. Now everything you're comparing at the lower payment level, you're comparing it to that $500,000 price point, and they're not going to be the same. It's a totally different product of 400,000 versus 500,000. And it's going to be very underwhelming. You're going to be disappointed, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to set us up for failure. So I like to really wait and start showing you homes once we've talked to the lender. We're all on the same page as far as what is your purchase price comfort level and what payment does that mean for you, and are you really comfortable with that payment? Does that make sense? Okay, great. So we've hired the realtor, we've hired the lender. The next step is the search. And the search is really important to focus a little time on. Most people think of the search as going on, like I know you mentioned, you've been looking on Zillow. Zillow is a great platform. There's a lot of homes available on there. But I'm going to put you on an MLS search that's going to email you the minute anything comes on the market, or the minute a home adjusts as far as the price point, maybe they do a price reduction and now they're in our ballpark and we want to look at them. But MLS isn't the only way I'm going to rely on showing you homes. Once I get a really good understanding of the types of homes you want, we're going to look at homes. We're going to maybe look at new construction. I may set us up on appointments to go visit new homes. If you're out and about and you decide to tour a new home model, let them know you're represented and working with an agent. I'm going to actually give you some of my cards this morning before we leave. So you can give those builders my cards. So we may want to look at new construction. We may want to also look at for sale by owners, or perhaps expired listings, listings that failed to sell in the last year or two. I may need to door knock and find you a home. I may need to write letters and find you a home. I've done all of those to find my buyers homes. So just know that the home may not be on MLS. It may be on MLS, which is great. There's a lot of homes on the market right now, lots of inventory to choose from. But just know my job is to look beyond the MLS to make sure we find you the right home. And there's two factors when finding you the right home that we should consider. We want to keep in mind, is it the right home as far as the bells and whistles, the sticks and bricks, right? Is it the right kind of siding and the paint color and this number of rooms and then bedrooms and bathrooms and all of that, right? Does that all make sense for you? But then is it the right home also as far as location goes and the purpose it's going to serve? Can you see your family there for the long term? Does the appreciation make sense, right? Where we're buying and at the price point we're buying in, do we think it can appreciate over the next, 5 to 10 years? Is it the right purchase for you as far as asset protection goes? I like to talk about that. So it's not only the home for you as far as the feels go, but it's financially, does this home make sense as far as a buy and hold investment type product? Because keep in mind, you buying a home is one of the biggest financial decisions you're going to make in your life. It can really impact your future financial success. And I want to make sure we're smart about that and look at that as we go into the home buying process. Does that make sense? So 2 steps to the home search. And again, I'm going to be helping you find homes beyond the MLS. That's my job as your realtor. All right. Once we do find the perfect home, then we're going to make an offer. And making an offer sounds easy, but there's a lot that goes into it. My job is, as the agent, is to study, what did that buyer buy the home for? How much have they invested in it? How, are they upside down on the home, or is there a lot of equity? Is there room to wiggle in negotiations? My job is also to get on the phone with that listing agent and to uncover as much of the seller's motivation as possible. And a good agent's not going to tell me much, and a bad agent's going to tell me a lot, but that helps us understand going into making an offer, where we should come in at as far as making that offer. If a home's just come on the market, they probably aren't going to want to negotiate, even if they're overpriced. I'm going to pull the comps before we write the offer. And the comps are the recent solds that are comparable to this home to give us an idea of true market value. But if the comps are saying this home's overpriced, then I may advise you we wait a little while and let that seller sweat it out, because a newly listed home, that seller's not going to want to negotiate regardless of how they're priced. They're going to think their home is worth it because you're liking it within the first few days or few weeks of it coming on the market. But after that seller's been sitting there 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, now they're starting to have doubts about that price, and maybe they're getting more realistic. And so we're going to look at that. How long has it been on the market? How is it priced? How much do they owe on it? What's their motivation for selling? We're going to take all those factors into account before we decide on an offer to write and submit. My job is to submit you the most aggressive offer possible to get you the best deal possible. And then we're going to negotiate back and forth. And that's where my experience is going to come into place to negotiate and protect as much money as possible for you on that purchase price. Once we're under contract, that's when we're going to do what's called our due diligence period. Let's scroll up here. Where we're going to make sure this is the right home for you. So I'm going to have you do things like maybe drive through the neighborhood a couple different times. If I go show you a home at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, that neighborhood's going to look really different than 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. So I'm going to make sure you like the feel of the neighborhood all the time. On the weekends, one time I showed a home and it was right across the street from the pool and community clubhouse. Well, it looked fine Tuesday at 10, but when my client went back on Saturday at 2, it was crazy impact and the whole world was parked in front of that house. And he was like, nope, not the house for me. So we want to just look at it at all different times a day. You may want to do the commute to work in the morning to make sure that the commute's going to feel good to you. We're going to want to do due diligence on the home itself. So we're going to want to do an inspection in this option period and make sure we uncover any unknowns about the home, have them get up in the attic, have them test the AC and the heat system, check all the plumbing, all of that to make sure this is really the right home for you. I like to call this option period your cold feet period. So if you're going to get cold feet, we want to do it in those first 7 to 10 days, whatever time frame we negotiate on that contract. And you can back out of that option period during that option period for any reason at all. So you can just wake up one morning in that option period and say, Carlin, I had a dream. My father told me in my dream, I can't buy this house. I need out of this house. We can get you out of that house and protect your earnest money. And we'll talk about the money side in a minute. But during this option period, that's when we really want to make sure we're 100% positive we want to move forward with the purchase of the home. Does that make sense? All right. After we're through the option period, the next step is to do the due diligence for the lender. The lender's due diligence is that appraisal. And you've probably heard the word appraisal before, but the lender's going to want to make sure that the home really is worth what we're buying the home for. And that's the appraisal report that's going to tell them it's worth it. And again, I mentioned before, my job's to be as aggressive as possible and to get you the best deal possible. But occasionally, again, we're going to run into a seller who maybe thinks it's worth more than it should be. And I'll let you know before we write that offer if I'm concerned with appraisal issues. We'll go into making that offer upfront, knowing exactly if I'm concerned with appraisal issues or not. But in this market, it's very rare we're going to run into an appraisal issue. I'm usually really good at making sure that I'm getting distracted. We're writing an offer at a purchase price that's hopefully below that appraised value. So my job again is to be aggressive and get you the most value for your money on that home. Any questions on any of that? No? Okay, great. So then the final step is going to closing. So we've done our due diligence. We know we want the home. We've done the inspection. We addressed any concerns found on that inspection. Your lender's done their due diligence. The appraisal came back. It appraised for a little bit more than what we're buying it for, which is great news. And now it's time to go to closing. Closing is going to be a time frame set. Usually I prefer to close on a Wednesday or Thursday. I don't like to close on Fridays. You're going to need to take a little bit of time off of work. It's going to take us about an hour. We're going to schedule it though around your schedule on that Wednesday or Thursday. And the lender is going to send all the documents to title where you're going to sign all the documents. You're going to kind of sign your life away. It's going to seem like a lot. You're going to sign for an hour. Your hand's going to hurt at the end. But we're going to do our part in that closing. And then there's a second part of that closing, which is the seller signing. That seller will sign at the same day and location, but at a different time than we sign. And so I just want to let you know that, because what happens is the lender's going to need to get documents from the seller when they sign, and our documents. They're going to review all the documents, and then they're going to release the money. And the releasing of the money is called the funding. And the funding could happen later in the day. It could possibly even happen at the end of the day or possibly the very next day. That's why I don't like to close on a Friday. I want to make sure you have keys in your hands by Friday for the weekend so you can move in over the weekend. So I'm going to schedule us to close on Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have keys by Friday and you're moving in that weekend. That funding piece can just, depending on wires and timing, could take a little longer. And so I always just want to let buyers know up front that you shouldn't show up to closing with the U-Haul trailer packed, ready to move in right when you sign. It just doesn't work that way. It's going to take us a few hours. If you do want to get in that day, let me know ahead of time, and I'll ask the sellers to close earlier in the day. But sometimes the seller doesn't get off work until 3:30 and can't get to close till 4, and then they sign, and by the time docs get to the lender, funding happens after 5, and sometimes the title company's not there to fund it, and so then that's when it carries to the next day. So just to be safe, prepare and plan. We close on a Wednesday or Thursday, you'll have keys by Friday for that weekend. That's the safest. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right, let's keep going. Any questions on this page before I jump to the next page? All right. So my next page here just breaks down in a little more detail who's doing what and when. Like I mentioned, we're going to get pre-qualified. That's going to give us a budget to look at. We're going to start looking for homes and we're going to make an offer. Once we go under contract, these are kind of the steps we're going to follow, which is our due diligence, like I talked about, the inspections and so forth. But once we have an accepted contract, the mortgage company is going to start their process and the title company is going to start their process. And the title company is an independent party who holds all the money in their bank account and helps the transaction facilitate. They also issue an insurance policy that's going to give you peace of mind knowing that nobody can come back and claim ownership in that home. Like once the home is yours, it is yours. And that title insurance is going to protect you in case anybody comes back trying to claim an ownership. Now, the mortgage company and the title company are both working simultaneously behind the scenes to do things for this transaction. My job is to make sure I stay on top of them, making sure they're doing their job, and to make sure there's no red flags that pop up, no concerns that come out of it. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in both companies. And just note that I'm going to be paying attention and watching and making sure everything's explained to you along the way. And if you have any questions along the way, you're going to get emails when I get emails. But I'm going to be explaining what the emails mean. Just know that. My job is to look out for your best interest throughout the entire transaction from the time we start today until closing. And so that includes paying attention to all those emails and explaining to you what they mean and when you should care or not care about things. The only thing I do want to stress is once your lender starts working on the loan, we're under a time frame. So let's say we write up a contract, an offer, and we put in a 30-day closing. Your lender has to get documents from you along that 30-day process. You're going to submit initial documents up front, and then it's going to go to the underwriter, and they may request additional documents later on. And then those documents may trigger more documents. It's not fun to buy a home right now as far as the lending side goes. I always want to warn the buyers, but the process is worth it in the end because we get this great house. So just hang in there. No, it's kind of a pain. But they're going to work really hard to get you to the closing table. My job, I'm going to be staying on top of that lender to make sure we meet all the required deadlines in that contract and we do close on time. We don't want to risk not closing on time. So it's important we really work with the lender closely. And so if they request documents from you, just if you can be really responsive in getting them those documents back right away. But again, if they request something and you don't understand, ask me questions along the way. Together, we'll get you through this process on time, I promise. Okay, so when we go to closing, we're going to all meet at the closing table, like I said, talked about earlier. At the title company is where we're going to close. So that title company is going to handle all the documents, all the money, facilitating the transaction, and we're going to close at that company. And again, just keep in mind, we don't get keys until we funded, and that means everybody has signed, both parties have signed, the money has come to the bank, the lender has reviewed all docs and said, yep, give them the money. The seller gets their money and you get the keys. That's the funding part of it. So that's how that works. All right, let's talk about the money involved. So I keep mentioning money. Money's going to title. What money are we talking about? So this is the cost that I want you to expect in the transaction. The first one's the earnest money. So typically on a purchase of, we're talking about $400,000 for your budget is what we think we're going to be at. Generally, we're going to put what's earnest money, which is 1% of the sales price in good faith at the title company at the time we go under contract. So let's say we write the offer for $395 and we actually get it accepted at $395. We're going to offer $3,950, 1% of that purchase price in good faith money, earnest money, that will be written on a check and given to title and cashed and deposited at title when we go under contract. So two things to note on that. First, that earnest money is then applied towards your closing costs at closing. So it's not like you're just giving this money away. You're going to get it credited to you for the actual closing. But we want to be able to write a check at the time we write the offer. So I always like to ask my buyers, do you have checks now? You probably don't. That's okay. Your bank, most banks will print a sheet of checks for you. So you may just want to stop by the bank and get a sheet of checks so you have them ready to write once we do find the right home, because we're going to be under a really quick timeline to deliver that earnest money to the title company within 3 days of getting our contract accepted. So we just don't want to risk not delivering that money and fulfilling our contract obligations once we find the home. So I like to just get the checks in your hands ahead of time, get that done early. The other check we're going to write, and technically we're going to write one check for both fees, but the other fee we're going to spend money on is the option fee. Now, again, the option fee is a fee for that option period that we talked about up front, to do your due diligence, to be able to do our inspection and ensure the commute's okay, and ensure, I like the neighborhood of all times of day. Like, yes, this is the right home. I'm pulling the home off the market for a period of 7 to 10 days. I'm going to try and negotiate about 10 days for us. And I'm going to offer about $150 at our price point. And I would like to, what we're going to do is you're going to write the check for the earnest money and that option fee. So that option fee of $150 for that 10 days is saying, hey, seller, we're willing to put our earnest money on the line, but first give us 10 days up front to make sure it's really the right home for us. And if we decide to terminate in that option period, seller, you keep the $150, but I'm getting back my $39.50 from the title company. If we decide to proceed, then the $150 and the $39.50 get applied towards your purchase price. So it gets applied towards your closing costs and your down payment and all of that at closing. Does that make sense? So we're basically paying for money to take the home off the market to make sure it's really the right home for us, our cold feet period, make sure, we don't want to back out for any reason whatsoever, and proceed. But if we do back out, we're out that $150. During that option period, we're going to write another check, or probably pay with a credit card, and that's going to be our inspection. Our inspection for the size home that you're looking at is going to run us probably about $400 or so. I'm going to give you at the back of this book our list of inspectors that I love to work with, but if you know of any inspectors, you can pick any of them. I just recommend you maybe decide on your inspector, do a little due diligence, pick the inspector you want to work with now, so that when we find the right home, you're ready. You say, Carlin, Steve's my inspector, hire Steve. I will then reach out to Steve and I'll coordinate that inspection. We want to do that inspection in the first few days of our option period, in that 10-day option period, so that we make sure there's no surprises. We negotiate anything that does come up that we may be concerned with. When we do inspect and negotiate, we're looking for big ticket items. We're looking for, any AC issues, or plumbing issues, electrical issues, or structural issues. Structural issues may be deal breakers. Other issues may be things we can negotiate. We typically will negotiate any of the structural systems, mechanical systems, safety concerns. But then on the inspection report, we're going to see some smaller things, possibly like code issues. Maybe the home we're buying was built in the 90s, and code back in the 90s is different than today. Well, the inspector has to point out those code things, but if they're not safety concerns, we're not going to negotiate those. Those are just things they have to point out, just so you know. But we'll look at the full spectrum, what price did we pay for the home? What's the market value of the home? What are the concerns on the inspection report? And we're going to negotiate during that option period and make sure if we need things addressed by the seller, we ask them to fix them, or maybe we ask for money instead of them fixing them. We have all those options, and we'll look at what's the best scenario for you given that point at that point in time. So just the key is, though, to be ready to spend money on that inspection report, again, about $400 during that option period. The next expense is an appraisal. Typically, appraisals are running anywhere between $500, $600, maybe $700 right now. Your lender, some lenders want that money up front for appraisal, and some will collect it at closing. So just know that that's going to be another fee that we're writing a check for, literally. I will let the lender know once we're through our option period that, hey, lender, we are proceeding with this purchase. Now it's time to spend the money on the appraisal. We don't want that lender spending the money up front until we've done our inspection. Like, there's just no need to spend all that money if we ended up backing out of that purchase. Does that make sense? So don't worry, I'll coordinate with your lender and let them know when it's time to order that appraisal. But once we've done our inspection and we've negotiated any concerns and we're moving forward with the purchase, then we'll let the lender know to order that appraisal. Another expense that could come out of pocket not until closing is the survey. I'm going to do my best to negotiate that you don't have to pay for that cost. With my experience, I'm usually pretty good at being able to negotiate and make that a seller's expense and not the buyer's expense. So we're not going to worry about that cost when we're looking at these numbers right now. The last expense are kind of a broad paragraph of closing costs. So there are going to be fees that the title company charges us. There's going to be fees that your lender charges you to do the loan. And those fees typically are 2 to 3% of the loan. However, in this market, with interest rates as high as they are, we may want to negotiate for the seller to pay some of those closing costs. And we could possibly negotiate the seller to pay extra closing costs up to 6% to buy down that interest rate to save you more money and keep more money in your pocket. I really like to do that for my clients, to negotiate the ability to buy your interest rate down for the next 3 years. That will give us time while we're living in the home and enjoying the home. It's saving money on that interest rate. So right now the interest rate's at 8%. On a buy down, I can get it down to as little as possibly 5%, 6%, 7% for the next 3 years, saving you that money and giving us time to hopefully refinance the home once rates do come down. Hopefully they will come down in the next 3 years. So instead of an 8% fixed at the end of those 3 years, we can get you down into the sixes maybe, and lock in at that 6. So I'm going to negotiate as best I can. And again, we're going to look at the full picture before we write an offer. And together, you and I will decide, do we want to ask for the seller to pay for some closing costs so that we can buy down that rate? We'll look at that. But for now, for this purpose, I'm just going to put 3% in closing costs because that's typically what your lender and your title company is going to charge you. So on a $400,000 home, we're looking at about $12,000 in closing costs. Now let's talk about down payment. So beyond our closing costs, like I said, the option money and earnest money can be applied towards our closing costs. It can also be applied towards our down payment. I can also negotiate the seller to pay all of your closing costs if we want to keep more money in your pocket. But the one thing I can't negotiate and get rid of for you is that down payment. So on the phone, when we were talking, you said you've got 5% to put down, which is going to be $20,000 on that $400,000 price point. Does that make sense? Is that your comfort level? Yes? Okay, great. Now, do you have additional funds for closing costs, or do you want me to negotiate and make sure the seller pays all of your closing costs? You want them to pay the closing costs, not a problem. I'm going to make a note so that I make sure when we are ready to write that offer, that I'm preparing that offer, including negotiating those closing costs on your behalf. I'm also going to let your lender know once you've picked a lender that we're going to expect to roll in those closing costs as well. One thing I didn't mention up front that I meant to, and I started on that road, is that when you talk to a lender, we only need to talk to one right now to get a pre-qualification. But if you decide you want to shop rates, I wouldn't shop lenders right now. I would wait until we go under contract. And then in the first 2 or 3 days of that option period, that's when you want to pick the lender and commit. We need to commit pretty quickly in those first few days, but rates can change from the time we get the pre-qual right now to when we actually go under contract in the next, you don't have to be in your home till June. So it could take us the next 6 months to find you the right home. So I just don't want you comparing lenders' fees and rates right now. Let's do it once we find the home, because those are the numbers that are going to count. Whatever they quote you right now is going to change by the time we find the home. Does that make sense? That was a little sidebar. I meant to say that up front and I forgot. So, okay, moving on. I'm a little rusty at this. All right. So what to expect when viewing homes? I like to just kind of highlight these really quickly, just so you know, since you've not bought a home before. These are just kind of some simple rules to follow. So how many homes in total should we view? On average, it's going to take an average buyer looking at 8 to 10 homes before they find the right home. So it's going to take us a couple outings to find the right home. But that's an average. Sometimes we find the perfect home on day one, and sometimes it takes us longer than 8 to 10 homes. My job again is to find you the options. And since we've got time between now and June, we may view a few extra homes. The first step's really going to be for us to narrow down what subdivisions we want to focus on, and then the floor plans and finding you the right home at the right price. So we've got a little time, which is good. But let's keep in mind that we should never go view more than 3 or 4 homes at a time. So when I set you up on this MLS search today, it's going to send you probably 20, 30 homes we're not going to want to go and view 20, 30 homes in a day. We're not going to want to go view 6 homes in a day because you're going to hate me by the end of that day and they're all going to look the same and you're going to forget what they all look like. So up front, we may see 3 or 4 in a couple different chunks. But then after that, we're probably only going to see 1 or 2 at a time as new homes come on the market. Again, we've got time. We want to take our time and look for the right one. And, you know, it, like I said, it may happen up front, but it may not. Statistically, it's going to take us some outings to find the right home, which is totally fine. But again, we're just not going to want to see more than 3 or 4 at a time. So if you send me a list of your top 10, I'm going to help you narrow it down to the top 3 that are a priority at first, if that makes sense. Beyond that, I want to explain how showings are going to work. The owner shouldn't be there. I'm going to call ahead and make sure that we request a private showing for us. It's very, very rare that a seller may still be there. If they are there, that's fine. We're going to do our best to ignore them. I'm not going to want to engage with the seller. They're represented by an agent. And so my job is to talk to that agent who's representing their best interests. And at the same time, I want your best interests protected, which means you and I are going to have our discussions outside of the home. We're also going to want to talk outside of the home because sellers have recording devices that can be recording us. So I just don't want to, like when we're in the home, you can tell me how much you hate the home or what you don't like about the home. But what I don't want to do is have you in the home going, I have to have this home. No matter what, I'm paying full price. I don't care. I need this house. Like we just don't ever want to say that while we're in the home because we don't want to play that card and expose that card to the seller who may be eavesdropping. Those Ring doorbells will catch things as we're walking out. So I just say, tell me all the negative when you're in the home, go for it. But once we get out of the home, far away from the home, we can talk about the positives. All right. Beyond that, if we pull up to a home and you say from the outside, nope, I don't like it. Or we walk in the front door and you go, nope, I don't like it. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Just know that this is a product and a means to an end. The means to the end is giving you safety, security, you know, a place to call home, but it's also a financial investment like we've talked about. So if we pull up and we don't like the looks of the neighbors, not the neighbors, but the neighboring houses, or we pull up and you're like, it's the ugliest house I've ever seen in my life. It's okay to tell me, like, you're not going to offend me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Be honest with me. I'll cancel the showing and we can move on to the next one. All right, this next slide is just going over the benefits of buying, which I'm sure you've heard, and that's why we're meeting today. But this goes into a little more detail. And so I'll just let you read through that later on. Again, when you're having trouble going to sleep at night, whip this out and read through it. But I'm sure you've heard most of these by now, you know, talking about the tax advantages, the sense of control, the sense of community. You know, a landlord can't kick you out. You can get pets when the landlord can control the pets, you know, as far as the renting goes. So there's lots of good reasons to own a home, I'm sure you know. Another sheet I'm going to let you read later on, and these are words that I'll be talking about, or things. These are the terms to know: inspection, appraisal. I've mentioned some of these words already, but I just wanted to kind of give you a full understanding of what they all mean. These are the common words you're going to hear as we go through this process. Mistakes to avoid. This is an important one. I do really want you to read through this. You know, these are kind of the don'ts as far as buying a home. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but this is an important sheet for sure to read through. All right, this is a big one. Let's talk about, as I mentioned in the beginning, at the end of this appointment, we want to decide whether we're going to work together. If you hire me, you become my client. If you don't hire an agent formally through a written agreement, you are their customer. I don't work with customers. Over here on the left side of the page here is why I don't work with customers. Because my loyalty, if you're a customer, then my loyalty has to be to the seller. You want me to represent your best interests and your needs. You want me to keep your information confidential. Otherwise, I can only keep the seller's information confidential. You want to make sure that I disclose all facts to you. I advise you along the way. And I can't do that if you're a customer. So let's say a lot of buyers think, oh, I'm going to go look at houses through open houses, or I'm going to call the agent at realtor.com and schedule a showing. You're a customer to those people. You are not a client to those people. So you should just keep that in mind, that they have to represent and protect the seller. And we want to protect you. I want to protect you, and make sure that I'm looking out for your best interests. And so that's why we need to do it in a formal written agreement through what's called a buyer representation agreement. Are there any questions on that? No? Okay, great. I've got a couple testimonials on here. You can read those later. The last thing I want to talk about is how we get paid, how I'm going to earn my commission. So typically, it's a commission structure of about 3% that's offered by the seller and paid for through the listing agent. So the seller's hired an agent. That agent's agreed and negotiated to pay my commission out of the money they get from the seller. They're going to advertise that commission on MLS. That's a number I can show you. And again, I'm charging 3% to represent you and to help you with this purchase. And that fee is going to typically be offered through that commission by the seller. But occasionally, the seller doesn't necessarily have to offer a commission to me. And if that is the case, when we go to look at homes, I'm going to show you the homes. I'm going to show you how much is offered in compensation, so you'll see it. It's completely transparent. But if they ever are offering less than the 3% or no commission whatsoever, then what would happen is we would agree before we even look at the home that I'm going to negotiate and get you the best price possible, but then we're going to want to roll in my commission into that purchase price. So let's say we go and look at a home and they're on the market at 400 and I negotiate it down to 375. And that's as far as they're willing to go. We're all good with 375, but they didn't offer me a commission, and you knew this up front. So at 375, you would be owing me about $11,000. And so instead of the 375 being the purchase price, it's going to be 386. And so we're going to bump up the price to the 386 so that the seller will then pay my commission. Does that make sense to you? Okay, great. Any questions or concerns on that? No? Okay, perfect. Now, like I mentioned in this guide, I've got these vendor referrals. So I've got some lenders, I've got insurance companies, home warranty companies, and inspectors like I talked about. One of the great things is that I'm going to negotiate for a seller to pay for a home warranty for you. And so these three companies are three of like 20 companies out there. So I would recommend, I'm going to give you like a helpful sheet on home warranties, but you can research and pick out which company you want to have a home warranty with and how much money do we need to negotiate and ask that seller to pay for on your behalf so we get that home warranty included. A home warranty is going to give you peace of mind for that first year of home ownership. If something breaks on the home, the AC goes out, the water heater breaks, the dishwasher stops working, you're going to be able to call that home warranty company to come out and fix those items. Now, sometimes the warranty itself doesn't cover everything, but it absolutely helps some of that expense. So I always want to negotiate and do that for my clients. So keep in mind, these are three of the home warranty companies I like and recommend, but there's others out there and I'll give you the full list of them later. Okay, so let's jump into the formal paperwork part of the process. So what I have here is what's called our information about brokerage services. This is a form that the state of Texas requires all of us as agents to provide to clients. Like I mentioned on that paper we saw a minute ago, you're a customer and not a client until we decide to work together. And so this is what the state of Texas shows you or makes us disclose to you is oh my God, I'm screwing this up. This form is what the state of Texas requires us to disclose as far as how you can have representation in the state of Texas. There's three ways to be represented. So the first way here is when the agent's representing the seller or the owner. So I'm going to show you homes, and all of those homes, or almost all those homes, unless it's a for sale by owner, are going to have some form of representation by an agent of some kind. That's one way in which you can be represented in the state of Texas. The next way is what we're going to do today, which is the buyer representation. So by you agreeing to work with me, you're formally in writing agreeing to make me your representative for this transaction. The third way is called an intermediary, when an agent's doing both. Now, I don't allow both in my brokerage. We can have listings that are represented by the brokerage. And so you're going to allow me to show you those listings. But because I'm the broker, well, we're not even going to go down the part. Let's pretend I'm an agent. I'm an agent like you guys. So if we find a listing in my brokerage that's offered, it's going to be called an intermediary, but my broker is going to appoint me and make sure I'm protecting your best interests, and the listing agent's protecting their seller's best interests. Now, if you decided to buy one of my listings, that would change the game, but that's very rare that that's going to happen. Let's not even worry about that. I don't even have any listings right now to worry about. So we're not going to worry about that right now. I really hope someone didn't just hit a car. It sounded like somebody hit a car. Okay. So representation in Texas, an agent represents the seller, an agent represents the buyer, or both. And again, I'm not going to do both. I'm going to only work and represent your best interests if we decide to work together. Now, in Texas, legally, to avoid any disputes and to make sure we fully understand the agreement we're coming to, it should be in writing. And so I am going to now turn to the document I use. I am screwing this up. I've been talking too long. The document we use to put all of the agreement in writing is this buyer-tenant representation agreement. So you, Fred, or Amber, whoever you are we're going to go through this agreement, and then at the end, we'll decide if we want to work together. If we do want to work together, then we're both going to sign this agreement. This is agreement obligating me and obligating you as well. So let's jump into what that looks like. First of all, appointments. You're agreeing to appoint me as your representative in purchasing a property. We don't know that property yet, so we're defining a market area. You've mentioned you're thinking Buda, Kyle, but possibly South Austin. So on this agreement, I put Hays or Travis County for the market area. Now, let's say all of a sudden you got a job transfer and you had to relocate to Houston at the last minute, then this agreement is no longer in place because you're having to now buy a home in Houston. I'd like to refer you to an agent in Houston, but I'm not working in Houston. So this is only if you're buying a home in the Hays or Travis County area. This agreement would start today when we decide to work together, and it's going to last us through the end of June. I know you mentioned you want to be in your home by June 1st, but I just put a little buffer there to be safe. The obligation. So paragraph 6 is the big one. This is what you're agreeing to do, which is work exclusively with me in purchasing a home and allowing me to negotiate on your behalf. You're going to keep me informed along the way, and you're going to also inform other brokers or salespeople that you meet along the way that you're being represented and working with me exclusively. And then this says you're going to comply with the other provisions in the agreement, and we'll go through that in a minute. Representation. So this is saying basically that you're of sound mind, you can sign a legal agreement. All agreements are going to be in writing, and there's no other companies that we should involve. So you don't have a relocation company or an employer or anyone who's working with us on this transaction. So I'm not naming anybody there. I am not authorized. You're not agreeing to allow me to execute any documents on your behalf. I'm not signing anything on your behalf. You're going to sign everything. And you're going to feel comfortable signing before I ask you to sign anything, I promise you. The intermediary part of this, again, we talked about it a minute ago. That right now for this portion, it's just allowing me to show my company's listings. Again, I'm an agent at my brokerage. There's other agents at my brokerage who may have listings that we want to see, but I'm going to protect you on those purchases, and the broker will appoint the seller to be protected by their agent and me to protect you. I am not doing a good job. I'm butchering this. Everybody understands intermediary. I have to explain it. Okay. If you weren't comfortable in selecting intermediary and you said, no, I don't want to see any of your company's listings, then that would be no intermediary, but then that means I can't show you the listing. So I would advise we go ahead and allow me to show you my company listings right now. And then before we write the offer, we'll make sure you're completely comfortable in how it's going to work. But again, I'm wearing an agent hat. I'm not the broker. I'm going to protect you in this purchase. The only way you wouldn't be protected is, again, if you decided to buy one of my listings, but I don't have any listings right now, so that's not even a concern. All right. Let's move on. Competing clients. So this paragraph just says that I may work with other buyers, and I may have two buyers that decide to buy the same property. if that ever happened, I would have to keep it all confidential. I can't talk about your situation to the other buyer and vice versa. I also can't disclose anything about the offers. I would just let you know that there are multiple offers on a property. So this is just disclosing that that can happen. That is very, very rare to happen in this market, but it was happening a lot in the previous market when things were so crazy. This agreement is forcing me to keep your information confidential. So anything you tell me, you know, the max purchase price you're willing to pay for a home, I can't go and tell the seller or the listing agent that information. Obviously, I would never want to, because my job is to do what's in your best interest and to protect you and get the most money possible for this property. So this agreement's really important, and the confidentiality is really important to me. And that's the only way I'm going to be able to protect your best interest, is by keeping it all confidential. Now, I mentioned when we were talking in the agreement earlier in the buyer consultation guide that I charge 3%. Most of the homes in MLS, you know, last I looked, about 95% of the homes are offering at least a 2.5 to 3% commission in MLS. Again, if they're not offering a commission, or if the commission's less than this 3%, then we'll talk about it before we go view that home. We'll have two options at that point. We'll negotiate, like I mentioned, and roll in that missing commission piece into the final sales price and have the seller pay me my commission at closing. Or maybe, like, you know, it may be a circumstance where they're only offering 2.5%. At that point, I may be able to waive that 0.5% that's missing. But what I'd like to do at this point is we're going to agree to the 3%. That's what I typically charge. I believe my time, I've demonstrated everything I'm going to be doing for you. It's well worth it. But if before we go look at a home and there's a commission of less than that 3%, we'll have a discussion and decide how to proceed from there. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So again, commissions, like I mentioned, are typically paid for by the seller and will be paid at closing from the seller's proceeds. It's earned and payable once we go under contract and we get to the closing table and close. The only way you would owe me that commission is if you decide at the last minute to breach that purchase and not buy that home. I've earned my commission once I find you the home and negotiate and get you under contract, and it's due and payable to me once we go to closing. But if you decide to bust that closing for whatever reason, you would owe me my money at that point, because I've earned that commission. Does that make sense? I'm sure you're not looking to bust a contract. All right, let's move on. This talks about new construction. We're not looking at building a new home, but it would be 3% if we negotiate that. If I ended up representing you in the purchase for new construction, I would negotiate with the builders to have the builder pay me that commission. Protection period. So if we get to the end of, you know, your June timeline, and let's say your lease got extended, we haven't found you the right home. This was happening a couple of years ago because we had no inventory. Homes weren't coming on the market. So if I had found you a home before this agreement ended and you decided to buy it within those next 30 days, then I would technically still be due that commission. That's what this protection period talks about. But again, the chances of that happening are slim to none. There's plenty of inventory. And again, I'm going to not just rely on MLS to find you the home. We're going to look at the new construction for sale by owners, expired listings, door knocking, mailing, whatever I need to do to find you the home. So I'm confident we're not going to need to worry about this protection period. We're going to get you into that home by June 1st. Any questions on any of that? Nope. Okay, great. County, basically, we're going to close at a title company, like I mentioned earlier, and that title company will more than likely be in Hays County. If we find you a home in Buda, Kyle, where you want to buy, we're probably going to use a title company there. This just says basically the closing will take place and happen in the county in which we're purchasing or the nearby county. If you for some reason defaulted on this agreement says we would try to mediate before we sued each other. And if one of us were found in default, the other one's going to owe the attorney's fees for the prevailing party, if that makes sense. The only other couple notices here are that you should know that that 3% that I am charging as my commission isn't fixed or controlled or recommended or suggested by anybody. That is the fee that I believe I am worth. in my negotiation skills, my expertise, my ability to find you the right home, all the work I'm going to do to help you get through this, overseeing the title company, making sure they're doing their job and getting us to closing on time, overseeing the lender. That's the money that I am due and earned. And that fee is what I believe I'm worth. But again, feel comfortable in knowing that 95% of the homes on the market are offering that commission. I'm not an inspector, so just know when we go under contract in an option period, I may point out things that I see that could possibly be wrong with the home, but we're going to hire a professional to look at that. And if that inspector then advises us it needs further inspection, we may be hiring other professionals to help us along the way. So just know, like those are costs that you're going to need to pay for out of pocket. I can't, even though I can point things out because I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm married to a builder, it doesn't mean you want to rely on my opinion of the home. We need a professional's opinion of the home. We're going to have a title policy. Like I said, we're going to have a title insurance policy issued, and we're going to have a commitment when we go under contract. That's what Dee is talking about. So I'll negotiate, make sure that's all provided to you at no charge to you. We're going to have the seller pay for that. Again, home warranty, that's the residential service contract. I'm going to have I'll send you a list of all the home warranty companies. And again, I'm going to negotiate and get that seller to pay for the home warranty for you, but you get to pick the company. And just know there's lots of options. F is just warning you that, again, the sellers may be recording us when reviewing the home. We know that. G is wire fraud. It's really important to note. I'll never talk about wires with you through email or text. I'll have you work with a title company. If you need to send a wire to them, I'll have you call them directly and work all of that out directly. Wire fraud is just a huge, huge thing. So if you ever get an email from me that talks about wires, no, I didn't send it. I'll have you sign a form that just talks about wire fraud that we're going to sign, but I'm never going to give you wiring instructions. So if you ever see an email from me with wiring instructions, throw that email away. Do not respond to it. Do not follow those instructions. There are crooks out there trying to do wire fraud. It's terrible. All right. So that's the end of the buyer representation agreement. Do you have any questions for me? Are you comfortable in moving forward? Great. Let's sign and proceed. Okay, guys. That was a lot. A lot. What questions do you have for me? Lay 'em on me.
I have one.
Go for it.
All right. So on average, I was spending about an hour and a half to 2 hours in my consult. So that's pretty normal because this is an hour just given with your presentation only, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely plan on an hour. Like if they're new buyers, they're going to have a lot of questions, and questions are good because it helps you, stand out as the person of authority and you're advising them and demonstrating your value. Let me put it that way. So yeah, I wouldn't worry. I would plan for an hour. I think I can get through this a little quicker, but I've added pages to it, so it's taking longer for sure.
Okay. And the second question I had was, how are you starting to do your presentations, adding that new part where we have to alert them as to if the seller's not, and I may have missed it, if the seller's not paying the commission, this is how it's going to work.
So you may have missed it. So on my guide, the last 2 pages, I talk about, so I start with, if I don't represent you, then as a client in writing, then you're a customer and I'm representing the seller. So I'm kind of drilling down in why you need legal representation in writing. And then that leads me to my commission page. And I talk about that typically right now, most of the homes are still going to be offering a 3% commission or between 2 and 3%. However, if they don't, we'll talk about it before I show you that home. I'll disclose what the commission's offered on every home we go see. And if it's less than 3%, then we're going to negotiate the price and then we're going to roll in that commission to cover it.
Perfect. Thank you. I did miss it.
Yep. That's okay. No worries. What other questions? You guys have to have a question,
Carlin.
Go for it.
So on the counterpart of this, we're drilling into, hey, I charge 3%. And sometimes, I guess really lately, out of desperation from the builders, the new construction homes, They're offering 5-6%. What kind of conversation should we have when they're paying more than 3%?
So it's up to you on how you want to do that. What I used to do is and keep in mind, I haven't worked with buyers in this market to have a bonus, but what I used to do is go in intentionally saying 3%, 3%. And then when the builder goes, oh, it's 5, I go, oh, great news, it's 5. So 3% is covering my fee, and I'm willing to split the other 2% with you. And I used to split the bonus, if you will, with them. It's up to you how you want to do that. But, there's one or two ways to think about it. Right now, we're selling a lot more new construction than anything else because of interest rates. So you can go into every transaction thinking the possibility of a bonus is pretty strong because I'm showing a lot of new construction, and add a page on here to address the bonus and say it's 3% or more, and just be firm on that. Like, I charge a minimum of 3%, and some sellers and builders are going to pay me 4 or 5%. Or be willing, and put that, like, if you're going to take that stance, then I would make a page about it and just be very matter of fact about it. Or you act like it's a surprise when it happens, and then you're willing, to split or give them something from it. Maybe you don't split it. Maybe you say, oh, that's great. There's a bonus on it, so I'm going to pay for your home inspection for you, and maybe you give them the $500 home inspection or something instead. Does that make sense?
That's good. Yeah, in the past, I have had one specific builder that would not allow me to do a rebate on my DA to the client. So I'm glad that you said that and reminded me there's other ways to pay them the bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if I don't want to make this a habit, right? Like, if we can't rebate it because they've maxed out their closing costs or whatever, I can collect those funds at closing and pay the buyer outside of closing. We don't really want to do that because technically that would be lender fraud, because at closing, they're saying all funds are exchanging hands on this transaction. Yes. But worst case, if we have to, I will always write a check to the buyer after closing. We really don't want to do that if we can avoid it. But it's there if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. What other questions?
So are you saying that if they're paying you 3% commission when you're talking to the client, and you say, okay, depending on some builders, if you decide you're interested in this certain type of builder, they may be paying my commission anywhere from 3 to 5%. Is that meaning that because you're telling them that you're going to have to give them some of that percentage, or it's just as an open, information to them, not suggesting to, like,
Yeah. I mean, it's however you guys want to handle it. I used to say I charge 3%, 3%. And then all of a sudden, when a builder offered a bonus, I'd be like, oh, that's a great surprise to me. And the buyer didn't know either. They're now surprised. And so I just used to say, let's split the bonus and you get half of that bonus and I'll take the other half. If you don't want to do that and you think you're going to show a lot of builder homes, which I think we all are having to do builder homes right now because of the rates, then I would formally put something in your buyer consultation here that says my fee is a minimum of 3% up to 6%, and then you mention, look, as long as I get 3, that's great. But sometimes I will earn higher because builders or sellers may be offering more, maybe offering bonuses. So I just want you to know that that's in there. And then when they do offer the bonus, you just say, yep, just like I mentioned in my buyer rep or in my buyer consultation, and like it's expected and you're earning it. You've set the groundwork that you're earning it at this consultation. Does that make sense?
Because I mean that percentage is not coming out of their pocket, right? It's coming out of the builders.
Correct. But you have to be careful because some buyers, once they see you're getting a bonus based on the home they just picked, they're going to want a piece of that pie. Like, they're just buyers that are going to want that. So you either establish it up front or be willing to deal with it once it happens.
Yeah, I like
Okay.
establishing it up front. Like you said, 95% of the homes would be 3%. You could say some pay more, some pay less. My minimum fee is 3, but getting it out of the way and just being upfront about it and say, like you said, oh yeah, this is 5, like we talked about.
Yep, exactly. It's a safer way to say it for sure. Good question.
So Carlin, how would we include that into the buyer rep? I know you said to add a page.
So there's the exhibit A that I've
Mhm.
created, but I'm not requiring it right now. But you guys will need to use exhibit A if there's no commission offered before you go show a home. So every home we are going to go show, we're going to see what is offered on commission. And if it's $0 or $1 or less than the 3%, then you guys need to pull out that exhibit A and have them agree in writing that you're going to be able to roll up the price to get paid, or they're going to pay you at closing. Like, you've got to figure out how you're getting paid at that point. If you don't need this, the buyer rep form says you're getting paid at least 3%. So you don't have to modify it if it's more than 3. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
okay. That's what I was wanting to know. If we needed to
Yep.
specify that in the actual buyer rep that we're getting paid more than.
No, but it has to be disclosed.
Right.
So like on the new builds, the client's going to sign the commission form.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But just discuss that with your buyer and let them know, let them be aware that we.
Yeah, the last thing
think
you want to do is have them surprised.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we have already discussed with them a lower percentage because maybe their family, whatever the case may be, that's okay to put in there.
For sure. Yeah. You guys can do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Yep. 1,000%.
Can
And
you
it's up to
explain
you
as
guys.
far as
Go ahead.
Can you explain as far as I'm getting a little confused where you negotiate or you up the price so that it's paid for your commission?
Yes. So let's say we show a home at $425. They're offering 0 commission to buyer's agent. I negotiate, I get it down to 400, but so first thing I'm going to do is pull the MLS, right? I pull the MLS, it says 0 commission. So I say, hey buyer, here's one of those homes I mentioned in the consultation. They're not offering a commission at 425. We're going to go look at the home, but just know if you decide to write an offer, I'm going to negotiate it and get it down as low as I can. And then we're going to bump up the price to cover my commission. And so hypothetically, we negotiate, I get it down to 400. The 12,000 is what I'm owed. So we're going to ultimately execute a contract at 412 with the seller paying me the 12,000. Does that make sense?
No.
And that's where I'm confused too, Carlin, because so
That sounds confusing.
yeah, I was going to ask about that as well. So the seller is going to see that the price was bumped up.
So the seller's on the market at 425 offering no
Mhm.
commission.
Right.
I'm going to warn the buyer there's no commission at their 425 price. I'm going to go in and offer low because that's what we're doing this market, trying to get the seller off their price,
Mhm.
right? I'm going to lowball, or depending on the situation, right? I'm going to negotiate. We end up at a final negotiated price of 400 with no commission to me,
Mhm.
right? Your client can either write the check for 12 grand and you get paid at closing out of pocket directly from your buyer. Or if they don't have 12 grand to give you, then we need to bump up the price by that 12 grand so the seller will pay me from their proceeds.
Okay, so the buyer's going to pay that extra. Well, not the buyer.
The seller.
Right. Okay.
Yes. So I'm then negotiating, like we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we know their bottom line is 400. I'm now going to say, hey, listing agent, since you weren't offering a commission, my buyer wants my commission rolled into the purchase price. So here's a final contract at 412 with your seller paying me my 12 grand.
And maybe it's just because I woke up. I have a question on that. So what would happen then with appraisal coming in
So,
and that difference is there.
so that if they were asking 425 and I got them down to 4 and then bumped it up to 412, we shouldn't have an appraisal issue. Like, we should be pulling comps and knowing going into it, we're
Mhm.
not gonna have an appraisal issue. And in
Right.
this market, we shouldn't be.
Mhm.
If we have appraisal issues, then we're gonna, the first thing the seller's gonna want to do is get rid of the commission, but then we're turning to the buyer and the buyer's gonna figure out how they're paying us, right? Like, but the minute there's an appraisal issue in general, one of the first things we end up doing is all cutting commissions to help make it work, right? Like, the listing agent cuts commission, the buyer agent cuts commission, like whatever we have to do to get this home,
Mhm.
if there's no money to give, but your responsibility is to go in either knowing we don't have an appraisal issue, or buyer, I'm concerned about appraisal issue. Do you have money to pay the difference? Or do you have money to pay me out of pocket? Like, you should know that going in. And if for some reason we get a bad appraisal and we had no idea, then we're gonna have to negotiate and figure out, but you've done everything you can up to that point to try to get your buyer the best deal and to get you paid, and something may have to give in the end.
Okay, tomorrow I'm gonna ask, or Thursday, I'm gonna ask Travis and see if he's dealt with that kind of situation yet in regards to getting the financing above what's offered to the seller. Just
Yeah,
because it's a
there-
thing and it's new.
It is. It's not happened yet, and there's no loan product for it. Like, and the problem is, like, if a seller, all the comps in our MLS are based on sellers paying buyer agent commission, because this is so brand new. So if a seller's using those comps and justifying their price, but now they're not offering a commission, well, then they're really over asking too much. Does that make sense? So our
Oh, yeah.
job is really just to make sure we're negotiating up front to get it down.
Okay, thank you, Carla.
And we're pulling comps and really knowing what we're doing. Like, that's the biggest takeaway, is we got to pull comps and pay attention to that.
Okay. Thank you,
All right.
Carmen.
You bet. What other questions do you guys have? Otherwise,
I
I'll
have a
let us all
quick-
go.
I have a quick question. As far as the lenders, I know you mentioned like that you can buy down the rate. Is that an option like for every lender, or does it depend on the lender?
So not every lender does a 2-1 or a 3-1 buy down. Most lenders have a program that will allow for that, especially given the market we're in right now. The key is, though, not all loan programs will allow enough closing costs to be paid to pay for the buy down. So, like, for example, on a conventional 3% down or 5% down, you can only negotiate 3% in closing costs. So that 3% either can be paid. Adrian, I'm going to mute you real quick.
Oh,
Okay. So the 3% can be paid for the buy down, or it can be paid for the buyer's closing costs, but it can't be paid for both. You really need 6% to do both. So if your buyer has their own money for closing costs and they really just care about the buy down, then you can negotiate the 3% and get the buy down. If they're putting on a conventional loan more than 5%, if they're doing 10% or 20% down, then you can do the 6% and you're golden. Does that make sense? But again, make sure when you're talking to lenders, ask them, can you do a buy down? I would partner, find 3 good lenders. On the back of my guide are our lenders. We have an in-house mortgage company called Align. They can do the buy downs for sure. But if your clients come to you with a lender they want to use, that's totally fine. But you're going to want to talk to that lender up front and be like, hey, I want to negotiate closing costs to do a buy down. Can you do a 3-1 buy down?
Okay.
Good question. All right.
Carlin, you said your most recent version is going to be uploaded.
Yeah, so I'll have Amber make it a copy. I've got to make it a copy, and then it'll be a Canva link, and we'll add it to the portal under buyers for you guys. But change it, make it your own, and make sure you get my name and phone number off of it. Make sure you get my testimonials off, my bio off. Like, you guys are going to have to change it. I would add other pages. I'm still wanting to add more to it. But this is, 90%. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you guys for joining me, and sorry about the cluster on Zoom this morning.
Carlin, last
No worries.
question. The exhibit A, we only use if the the seller is not paying a commission.
Correct. So before you guys show any homes, look at the commission offered. If it's less than the 3%, you need to have a hard conversation or you're going to eat the difference before you show the home. And if it's
Okay.
0, you have to figure it out, right?
Okay.
So then the exhibit A comes out and we're having that hard discussion.
Should we have the appraisal discussion with the buyer before regarding in case it doesn't come up? Or just
No,
leave?
I wouldn't, because sellers are negotiating all the time right now. Like, 2 years ago, we couldn't negotiate off the price, but we're able to negotiate off the price, pull comps and negotiate, like the only time you're gonna have the appraisal issue is if maybe the home just came on the market and they're asking top dollar and they don't want to offer a commission. Well, then your buyer's got to make a decision, right? But if we address it up front before we show the home, they can decide, I don't even want to look at that home, right? Or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, we just got to study it.
Okay.
So
And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. If we did not initiate the exhibit A at the beginning, and then now we have to have that discussion and throw it in, I've never done this before. I'm assuming there's an amendment to the buyer's rep agreement?
No, I mean, you could just technically on the buyer rep say, see exhibit A and make them initial that change once you've done that.
Okay, so go back into it and
Yeah.
make that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Mhm.
So Carlin, is there going to be any changes as far as on the listing side that we need to discuss with our sellers if buyers, now that buyers or that change that may be coming where buyers don't get paid?
Well, you're going to have the same conversation we've been having for the last couple of years, which is, Mr. Seller, I charge 3% to sell my home, to sell your
Mhm.
home,
Mhm.
but you get to pick the buyer agent commission. It technically can be 0. It can be 3%. It can be a range in between there. Seller, you get to pick. I highly recommend you go towards the 3%. You could
Mhm.
even show them all the active listings and what they're offering in their MLS right now in that subdivision. But the seller gets to pick, period.
Right.
I would stress how hard a buyer's agent works and that I
Okay.
really recommend we offer something. You can choose not to take the listing if they don't want to do it, but they get to pick. We do not
Okay.
pick. Yeah.
Okay.
1000%.
I didn't know if anything was changing on that side at all.
No,
Okay.
no.
Do we need to print the sheet on the MLS in case it says a certain amount of commission and then they go back and they change it? At least you have
I would
proof.
1000% print the MLS sheets before you go show a home. Always, always, always. Even before this, I was saying that for sure. Yep. You want to print it for lots of reasons. You want to print it not only for commission, but for price, for terms, for things that they may be mentioning or not mentioning, failing to disclose proof of that. Like you always want to print the full version and have them. At least, well, let's just say that. Yes. The answer is yes, Harvey. Good question. Okay, guys, we are just about out of time. If you have other questions, feel free to reach out, but I'm going to let you all go. Happy Halloween.
Thank
Feel free to
you,
tag
Carlin.
Thank you so much.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.
Bye.